Hi folks, for those who haven't been following the webcasts over the last few days, I'm Ross Blackman, Minister at Hamilton Hall Parish, Church of Scotland, and it's a pleasure to be able to keep on bringing out these webcasts, particularly at this time. We hope to just improve people's morale just a little bit by a wee daily offering. I want to thank you for those who've been in contact so far. There's been all sorts of different comments, which have been lovely, and also some suggestions for hymns over the next coming weeks. Some folks have got favourite hymns that they would like us to be able to sing, particularly on our Sunday morning worship, and so we'll try and make use of those over this next little while. Just a reminder too that this Sunday will be our annual stated meeting, our stated annual meeting, and on the church website the annual accounts are up there already. They've been approved by the Kirk session, and so it just gives the congregation an opportunity to ask any questions about that. So on Sunday morning with our live stream, there will be an opportunity for a phone-in if you've got any questions about those, but the accounts are actually up on the website now if you want to get an advanced look at them and just formulate any questions that you might have. Please do feel free to send them early. That would be most helpful, particularly for our treasurer and finance officer, to be able to have a look over them and be able to answer you appropriately. But let's get back to our daily Bible reading challenge. We've been working our way through the Gospel of Matthew, the first book in the New Testament of the Bible, and we're nearly at the end of it. Tomorrow we'll be finishing it, and for now we're looking at chapter 27. So it's Matthew chapter 27, if you'd like to follow along. It's a fairly long chapter. We've got things in there about the remorse of Judas, the crucifixion of Christ, and things like that. So we'll see how we get on today and how it also might relate to perhaps how we're feeling just at the moment. Matthew 27 then, from the beginning. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate the governor. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. They said, What is that to us? See to it yourself. And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, It's not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money. So they took counsel and brought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price has been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said, You've said so. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, Do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he gave him no answer, not even a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus who is called Christ? For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent words to him, Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to him, of them, Which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, Then what shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ? They all said, Let him be crucified. And he said, Why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, Let him be crucified. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, or rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. And all the people answered, His blood be on us and on our children. And he released to them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. And they stripped him and put on a scarlet robe upon him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand, and kneeling before him they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spat on him, and took the reed, and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, and put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. When he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. So the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders mocked him, saying, He saved others. He cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. If he trusts in God, let God deliver him now, if he desires him, for he said, I am the Son of God. And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. Now from the 6th hour, this would be 3 o'clock in our afternoon, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, This man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe, and said, Truly, this was the Son of God. There were also many women there looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea, named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and laid it in his own new tomb, which had been cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb, and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary was there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate, and said, Sir, we remember how that impostor said while he was still alive, After 3 days I will rise. Therefore order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away, and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and this last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard of soldiers. Go make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. Amen. I want to pick up one error as I made a wee comment there as we were passing by. I said that the 6th hour was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Actually, their hours of the watches began at 6 in the morning. The sixth hour would have been midday, and then at 3 o'clock was when that darkness came over all the earth. So the darkness came from midday, which was the sixth hour, until the third hour, which was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at which point Jesus cries out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. So, with that wee correction, what can we make of this text? There's so much that's in there. And I think I just want to pick out a single point, and that is the loneliness and the isolation that Jesus inevitably must have felt as he was going through this trial. There was nobody there standing with him. And most of the time he stays completely silent in all of it. There are very few words of Jesus in this chapter. If you've got a red letter Bible, which highlights Jesus' words in red, you'll notice that literally all he says is in front of the governor. You have said so, when he's asked, are you the king of the Jews? And then, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, meaning, my God, why have you forsaken me? So Matthew's account of what's taken place here, as he remembers it and recalls it, and what he pieced together in these earliest days, because this is probably one of the earlier Gospels to have been written, not necessarily the first, but certainly one of the earlier ones, portrays this in this way of Jesus saying very, very little indeed. There isn't much by way of detail. He very, very quickly gets to the crucifixion itself and the mockery, and certainly just prior to that, the way that he was abused as well. But a very, very lonely time, and on the cross as well, it seems that all around him are assailing him. He's truly feeling forsaken. And perhaps you feel a little bit like that yourself. Perhaps those that you would have expected to have been calling you or rallying round just haven't called yet. And I wonder, in that kind of circumstance, whether we might make the first move. It isn't always the case that folks remember us as individuals before everybody else. There might be a whole list of people that they're trying to get through, or they may have other day-to-day concerns that are bothering them and making them think upon at this time. For everybody, we're all in the same boat here, for everybody, there are a variety of priorities that are coming up now, and a variety of concerns. And sometimes getting in contact with others isn't the first thing that's on people's minds. So I guess I want to pose that question back at us if we find ourselves coming into that frame of mind. What can we do about it? And also, is there anybody we can get in contact with? Let's turn back to these words of Jesus, though, particularly this last statement, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. It's thought that this comes from the Psalms, Psalm 22, and it was a rabbinical tradition where they would quote the first lines of a psalm, and then it would bring back to mind, because a lot of people maybe had memorized these things, the whole words of the psalm and the context of it. And I'd encourage you to take the chance to read Psalm 22, just as a little bit of homework for yourself, following on from this, to see the sentiments are there, because these words are the very opening words. My God, why have you forsaken me? And a little bit later on in that psalm, just a few verses in, there are some words that are also to be found on the lips of the chief priests. These words in Matthew 27, which we're reading, verses 43. He trusts in God, let God deliver him now. Those words too, although Jesus didn't utter them, are to be found also in that self-same psalm, Psalm 22. So it's thought that Psalm 22 might well have been one of these messianic or prophetic psalms. And in fact, this chapter does allude to a number of prophecies. Jeremiah is cited, and this perhaps is what Matthew's trying to make the connection with between the Old Testament and now what's happening to Jesus. What a situation. Feeling forsaken, and people perhaps saying things about him, and particularly perhaps folks saying, well, he's trusted in God. Where's God now? And I know some people have been saying that, all these Christians trust in God. Well, how on earth is it that Christians are suffering from this coronavirus at the minute? God didn't spare his son, and very often we're not spared things either. There are all sorts of things that we're not spared of. And so it would be probably fairly unrealistic to think that we would be saved from every single disease or calamity that might possibly come upon the human race just by virtue of our Christianity. There's a reality that we walk through things in life, and Jesus too walked through things in life. Yet the difference is he promises to continue to be with us in all that we continue to experience in our daily life as well. So that as we walk, even feeling quite alone, that he is there with us. I just want to encourage you with that thought today, whether you're in your home or taking a very brief spell out of the house to get a breath of air, but in whatever you're feeling and whatever you're doing, you're not alone. Christ is with you in the first instance. In the second instance, there are people who care, even if they haven't yet lifted the phone. So can I again encourage you to take that first step, lift the phone to perhaps those you'd hope would phone you, and also phone those who perhaps when you start racking your brains, you think of as people who might actually really appreciate a wee call just for a few moments of encouragement to lighten up their day. That's a possibility that we all have to do even today. I don't want to comment on anything else in that chapter. There is a lot in that chapter, but we'd be here all day if I was to do that. So at that point, we'll leave the chapter alone and take a moment in prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we take the opportunity again to pray before you, even as so many prayed in these last few days with various endeavours, praying either as led on various webcasts or perhaps with the Lord's Prayer recently, where there was a national attempt to pray the Lord's Prayer towards you. We also take the opportunity not only to be thankful for you for every day of life that we have, and for the friends and family that we do cherish so much, but we also take the opportunity to be thankful for the other things that we have that we often take for granted. The great shout out that's been made out in these last few days for our NHS, the way that the National Health Service has rallied around in the midst of this whole dilemma as well as pandemic, is that how they treat people and what's the best way of both treating them and making sure they're safe, either in hospital or in their own homes, nursing homes and other places besides. We thank you for all of those involved in both the NHS and the other emergency services, and as we've mentioned before, the armed forces also in the part that they're playing to make life that little bit easier for people, and sometimes to enforce the things that need to be enforced in respect of us keeping ourselves safe, and perhaps we haven't got the sense at times to do what we ought to do. But we thank you not just for the clinicians, the doctors and the nurses and all the various other associated professions related to our health, but also those who support them, the various support services, the many who've stepped forward to volunteer in recent days to help out. For those various councils, including the one in South Lanarkshire Council, have been trying to organise a variety of things to support people, especially the most vulnerable, that they might have messages and food delivered to them when they're finding themselves in need like that, as inevitably all of us are. So we have got much to be thankful for. We have much to be thankful for, especially in the human spirit that continues to help people. And we thank you too for that Spirit of Christ that both empowers and impels us too to help people and go the extra mile wherever we possibly can. All these things we give thanks for, and we would just like to end our prayer on that note of thankfulness today, as we ask it in the name of Christ, who gave everything for us. Amen. Again, I hope that's hopeful today. I'll say no more at this point. We're fast approaching the weekend, and I hope you have a good day, and that God blesses you in all that you endeavour to do, and all that you're able to do in contact with others as well, maybe not at a close distance, but from a distance. So until the next time, cheerio, bye.